purpose of this video is for you to respond to some of the comments made by Richard Dawkins and co, including Professor Myers. The first point I want to raise is with regards to your question to Richard Dawkins at the World Atheist Convention in Dublin, when you asked him about the design of the universe, and he responded with regards to the...
So would you like to be honest today and say that no matter how much evidence points to design, you will still go for chance?
How dare you say how dare you ever accuse me of explaining life and the illusion of design by chance? Darwinian natural selection is the very opposite of chance, and if you think it's chance, you don't understand Darwinian natural selection. However, to come to your question...
So, do you believe that this universe is designed?
No.
So how did it come about? Would you like to explain? I'm a student. I'm trying to learn.
Okay.
Would you like to explain? If it's not designed,
let's divide the question into two. There's how did the universe come about, and the answer to that is, it's a question for physicists, and I can give an amateur answer because I'm a biologist. The second question is how does life, which has a much, much more powerful illusion of design. The universe itself doesn't have a very powerful illusion of design, as William Paley himself observed, but life does, and the illusion of design in the case of life comes about through evolution by natural selection. And natural selection is a very, very powerful generator, a very, very powerful engine of creating an illusion of design. But the thrust of your question is, would I be honest and admit it if the evidence went the other way? The answer is yes, I would be. I've always said so. I'm quite uncertain what that evidence could possibly look like. But if there really were good evidence for a designer of life, say, or a designer of the universe, then I would accept it. As I say, I find it very hard to imagine what it would look like. Since you have announced yourself as a Muslim, I would like to say that I have quite recently visited an Islamic school in England, and it was for a television program, and it was, I think, one of the best Islamic schools in the country, one of the highest reputation. The headmaster is, I believe, the chairman of a major council of Muslim teachers, and I was filmed talking to half a dozen girls, in girls half of the school. The girls and boys were not allowed to mix, so I was in the girls half, and we were talking about life and evolution of things. Every one of those girls, many of them wanting to become scientists, doctors and so on, said that they didn't believe in evolution, they believed the world was young. And then I turned to their teacher, who was the head of science in the school, and she said that not only did she not believe in evolution, but that every single pupil in the school did not believe in evolution. So this is a real problem in Muslim schools in Britain. I was quite shocked at that.
I do agree that Muslim scholars, Muslim scientists have to look into the issue of evolution in more depth. I do agree, I do accept this, and we can talk about this another time, but my question was very specific, that you seem to be accepting the notion of design in that interview. I don't know what that means.
It's an illusion. There's a powerful illusion
Right.
of design.
Right.
And I said that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, hey, sorry. So, you want to communicate atheism to the world, and we want to have a connection with you as a human being.
I want to communicate truth.
Good.
Do you believe in evolution?
Do I believe in evolution?
Yes.
I believe that I don't have adequate information to even make that judgment.
Well, that's very sensible. Now, let me give you some adequate information.
Oh, please, do so.
Okay. The evidence for evolution is absolutely solid. It's as strong as the evidence that the planets orbit. You do believe the planets orbit the sun, do you? Yeah.
Yes, I did science as a bachelor's.
Well, you did science, so why don't you know about evolution?
Because it was psychology, that's why.
Well, psychology ought to include evolution because the human mind, the human brain, is an evolved organ. Okay, the evidence for evolution, although it happened a long time in the past, so you can't actually see it happening, well, most of the time you can't. Nevertheless, I use the analogy of a detective coming on the scene of a crime after the crime's been committed, so you can't actually see it happen. But what you see is all the evidence, all the clues, all the fingerprints, all the footprints and everything else. And that adds up massively, more strongly than any court of law.
I agree with this,
yeah.
But the only contention some religious philosophers have, for example, not all religious people don't like science. Many religious people like science. For example, a lot of the science is revived from the Islamic history, as you know. The question that they would have is, evolution is a non-complementary paradigm with what's happening in cosmology, for example. For example, if you look at physics and the constants, some people say there'll be a fine-tuning here. There's some form
what do you
of design.
mean by non-complementary paradigm? What do you mean?
For example, I think you answered that question well in your book, page 157, 158, when you said we don't have an answer for physics like we do as in evolution. So the question you posed was, who designed the designer?
Yeah.
And I think what some Islamic philosophers contemporary would say, that's an interesting question, but even in the philosophy of science, and I think downstairs you wanted to ignore that question about the philosophy of science, the best explanation doesn't require an explanation. And to have an added infinite regress of explanations undermines the very fact that we need an explanation. So the design argument is more plausible than the chance with regards to the fine-tuning of the universe, which has nothing to do with evolution. That's
no, it's
way
nothing to
away.
do with it. It's a question of physics.
Yeah.
But how can it possibly be helpful to explain the origin of the universe, to postulate something complicated like a god? Why don't you say it's something like a spontaneous quantum fluctuation, something like that, which is simple?
Richard, that's a very good point.
Which is simple.
That's a very good point. But haven't you assumed that God is complicated and made of many parts?
Well, God's got to be complicated, hasn't he? Otherwise, because he couldn't forgive your sins and listen to your prayers.
But you're misconstruing physicality for like an entity with ability. Someone may be able to do complex things. Doesn't make his nature complex, though, surely. Because I think you're superposing.
What are you talking about?
Okay, do you want me to clarify?
If God is capable of listening to prayers, forgiving sins, knowing when you've done wrong and punishing you for it, how could he possibly be anything other than complex?
So are you saying that the design argument is not plausible because it creates more questions than it answers? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, but don't you think then a bloated multiverse or multi-universe is far more complex?
No, I don't actually. A bloated multiverse.
It has no rational force, does it?
A bloated multiverse is actually rather simple. It's just very wasteful. It's very uneconomical.
Yeah, but doesn't go in line with Occam's razor, though. Do not multiply.
Yes, it does. Right. It does really. No, it does rather.
How does
well,
it do that?
it's not. For a start, it's not beyond necessity. If it actually helps to explain something, it's not very complicated. It's just saying there are lots and lots and lots of universes.
Well, you're saying there's an infinite amount of universes.
Well, I'm not saying that, but
that's the theory.
Some physicists do. I'm not necessarily.
Designed by an intelligent creator, omnipotent creator being. Can you just run me past why, if we're all designed, most religious people, first thing they do is chop off half of the genitalia?
I gotta go.
Take care, Richard. Thank you very much.
Use your mind, your intellect. So it's telling you and trying to evoke thinking. You see?
I just want to make sure we don't have language barriers. So when I said that you are punished for not believing, you're saying that I'm wrong. That in your religion you are not punished simply for not believing.
No, you're right, but it's bigger than that. It's an existential question.
So I was right.
Because we really want to listen to Miriam Namazi because she has outdated clues about the Sharia, right? Especially when she talks about rape using four witnesses. That's nowhere in the Sharia. That's not testimony is enough.
Booklet, I just read a booklet.
It's just a joke. But anyway, we'll listen to that. The thing is, if we pay for your ticket to come down to London, would you have an intellectual dialogue with us with a non-Muslim coordinator?
An intellectual dialogue with you about what?
Or what we've been just doing so far? Would you do that?
I'll be around. You might
I'll
be
tell you
able
what.
to, yeah.
I'll give you a forum.
Cool.
Okay. We'll book you on the Magic Sandwich Show.
What is that?
Magic Sandwich Show.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me say it again. We hear in other countries of Sharia courts that are imposing, for example, penalties of the stoning to death of homosexuals or adulterers. Is that something that is in the Quran? Is it something that you approve of?
Okay, first and foremost, stoning homosexuals is not in the Quran. However, there is a criminal punishment for the public manifestation of homosexuality under an Islamic state and under Islamic law. However, most of the majority of Muslims Saudi Arabia and including Iran is not an Islamic state and doesn't carry Islamic values. Now,
so,
what's the punishment?
Let's just be clear about that then.
Sure.
So you're saying that implementation of Sharia law cannot justify the stoning to death of a homosexual or an adulterer. Is that what you're saying?
I don't understand the question.
What's the punishment? You said that they only get punished if they make a public display. What's the punishment?
Oh, to be honest, I don't really know what the punishment is, but there's a range of opinions amongst Islamic orthodoxy, and I think they're already available on the web. But
yes, I looked them up. All four major madhabs of the Sunnah sect advocate the death penalty, and they don't specify stoning, but it is the death penalty.
Yeah, but before we move on, only to be fair to Hamza, I want to know: is he saying that those Sharia courts that impose the death penalty for such things are not actually acting in accordance with the instructions of Islam in generic terms? And if not, does he actively oppose such stonings to death, for example, for homosexuals?
So because you're breaking up, I'm going to try and repeat the question.
I'm sorry, and I know other people want to talk, so I do want to press you on this point specifically. I didn't ask that. I asked whether you approved of the stoning to death of homosexuals, and I think that can be answered in short form.
Well, I'll give you an example. If I asked you, are you an abortionist, yes or no, would that really give me an understanding of what you believe?
Yes.
I don't think so, because you probably have reasons for that. And for example, the reasons that I would advocate, for instance, any crime in Islam, if there is a judiciary, if there is the conditions in place which make the punishment to be inflicted virtually impossible. For instance, take adultery as an example. You need 4 witnesses to see the act happening in public.
I'm sorry, Hamza, you are avoiding the question. Let me press you again. Do you approve of the stoning to death of homosexuals?
I approve of the Islamic punishments in the various contexts, and if you ask me what the context is, I could explain it.
Well, try and... You're aware of judgments of Sharia courts where they have said that homosexuals should be stoned to death. Do you approve of that?
I don't approve of that statement, no.
Right, okay.
Because that's actually not even part of Sharia. Because it's actually public manifestation, when you're seeing it in public, do you see? That's why we don't pass judgment on individuals. Whatever happens in your home, happens in your home. There is no right in any of the four madhahib, the 4 schools of thoughts, that someone could go into your private life and tell you what to do. It's when it's the public manifestation of a particular act, which you don't even find in Soho in London, right? That is a different scenario. So the statement you made, I disagree with. No, we should not kill homosexuals, and we should not do any act like that.
Okay, thank you. Aaron.
You keep making the distinction about public and private affairs.
Sure.
What if homosexuals do commit an act of open affection and plead guilty to being homosexuals? Then what?
Okay, pleading guilty to being homosexuals, I don't know what the reality is, but if they pleaded guilty to doing it in public and they swore on it 4 times, for instance, then they'll be eligible for punishment.
What punishment?
According to the Islamic narrative.
What is the punishment according to the Islamic narrative?
Oh, I don't know. There's various opinions.
I think you do, sir.
I don't, honestly. There's different opinion. Some people used to say throw them off a cliff. Some people used to say stone them.